It's my favorite day of the week. Okay, we're going to let people in. I'm going to do my usual. Please know that you have arrived at the USDLA Free Friday webinar series in case you got diverted. We all have so many Zoom links in our mailbox these days. I'm always worried. I'm like, just want to remind you where you ended up. So I'm not going to take up much of anybody's time. For those of you who have been here before, you know the drill. For those of you who are new, I'm Valerie. I'm on the board at USDLA, and we're glad you're here today. And I hope this is not your first and last appearance. We have lots of great content in store for you today. Dr. Davis has graciously agreed to come in and share all sorts of wonderful insights. I got a little sneak peek of some of her slides. But first, I do have to do I got to pay the bills, keep the lights on, all that stuff. But we will turn things over to Dr. Davis in just a moment. But bear with me. Do want to remind you that this is not the one and only webinar. We have another one coming up next week, and that's going to be with Dr. Alexandra Salas, and she is actually at USDLA as well. She is the policy chair, and she's going to be giving us a little bit of a preview of Public Policy Week that's coming up in January, and she's going to be talking about the outlook for 2026. So you probably don't want to miss that. She's going to be touching upon various constituencies, our K-12 friends, our higher ed friends, and anybody who is concerned about policy and such things, which is pretty much all of us. All right. Also want to remind you that these are recorded. I always get the question, is this going to be recorded? Yes, it's being recorded. And most of the recordings from our Friday webinars go up to usdla.tv, which is our YouTube channel. You can see things like Dr. Worrell's amazing session on AI. I don't know if you're still interested in that. It seems like people want to know about AI. Funny thing. But yes, please go watch the replays over at usdla.tv. Also, want to remind you that USDLA is a membership association and membership participation does matter. Your generosity and participation and support is a big part of what makes events like today possible. We provide as much free content as we can, and that all happens because of the volunteers here at USDLA. Most of us are volunteers, and also all of the members who participate with us. And so therefore, some of the content we save for our members, and it's in the membership portal. We had a wonderful accessibility session a while back from our friends at UCO, and other things like that are in the membership portal that you would get access to. You would also get access to things like the entire range of sessions that we had at National Distance Learning Week in November. We had 2 to 3 sessions each day. All of those recordings are available to you in the membership portal. We invite you to join as a member, and I want to let you in on a little surprise secret that some people still don't seem to know. You can get a 60-day free trial membership. So I understand, especially this time of year, budgets and people might not have access to get, the invoices and stuff. You can go ahead and join over the holidays. You can binge watch all sorts of things in our catalog. So please keep that in mind. And also please mark January 20th through the 22nd. That's Public Policy Week. I think they may actually be adding the 23rd because we had so many wonderful speakers that wanted to be part of it this coming year. I started to say this year. It's hard to believe that's actually next year. But I don't know how December snuck up on us, but here we are. Also next year, I want to remind you to please mark your calendars if you can join us for the national conference. It will be in June. We're going to be in Cleveland next year. New spot for us, Cleveland Rocks. We're going to have an option to go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We're working with the Cleveland not natural history, the science museum there. So there's going to be lots of activities for everyone. K-12, again, we serve everybody. I always say if you serve learners at a distance, we serve you. So we have things scheduled for our K-12 friends, for our higher ed, for government, military, nonprofit, corporate. If you're out there, we want to see you. So if you can come, we would love to see you. If you cannot make it on site, however, we do have a virtual option. I always like to remind people of that. That will happen the week prior. So the week, that'll be the 18th, that'll be the 17th and 18th will be the virtual sessions. So watch for that. And I'll also mention that the call for submissions for speakers as well as for the awards is still open. And I need to update my slide. People started to send us some messages. They're like, "It's the holidays. Can we have a little extra time?" So yes, you can have a little extra time as long as you get your submissions in by the end of the year. We will be happy to take a look at it. So please, we know you have insights and experiences, and you've done amazing projects that should be recognized in our awards program, or you want to share with your colleagues and you want to submit to be a speaker. We have all sorts of different types of categories of speaking this year, some new ones that you might not have seen before at the conference. So please go to the website, usdla.org, and check out all the options, or you can always reach out to me or anybody here at USDLA for more information. And then finally, in addition to our members, we have to thank our amazing sponsors and partners because, again, they make this possible. Through their generosity, we have partners like Verizon. I'll give a special shout out to because if you have not checked out their Skills Forward program, they are trying to provide free online training to 50,000 people. They want people to upskill and be able to get those jobs. And so that project is underway, and we thank them for they've been one of our long-term sponsors. Again, too many sponsors to name right now, but if you see someone on the screen that you're familiar with, please reach out to your rep or the person that you've been working with there. If you see people you don't recognize on here, please go and learn about them because we do really have the range of hardware, software, services, anything and everything you would need to serve the distance learning community. And finally, these are our platinum, gold, and silver, but we never forget about our other sponsors, our bronze level, exhibitors, and friends. Many of them will be at the conference with us in Cleveland, and you could talk to them in person. Our conference is intentionally kept small. It's not a cast of thousands. You really have the time to sit down and talk to the vendors, talk to your colleagues, and really leave feeling like you've had quality conversations, not just ran around and saw a lot of sessions. All right, so with that, I am going to stop sharing and I am now going to turn things over to our speaker today because that's why you all are really here. And so I want to first of all, I want to thank you, Dr. Davis, for being here. And now I'd like to turn it over to you for your amazing presentation.
Good afternoon from the capital of Florida. I'm in Tallahassee. I'm Dr. Shannon Davis, and thank you for joining me today. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about beyond words and how we can create thriving ELL communities and K-8 schools, but through data and university partnerships. So I want you to know that there's something in here for everyone, including university level. We're going to start with an introduction, and then I'm going to share with you our learning objectives. That's something we do in K-12 all the time, and you probably do it in higher ed as well, but it's important to know what you're going to learn. Also, we're going to talk about data for best practices. There are many ways that we can reach our ELL population. Some testimonials, and of course, Q&A. So anything that you would like to ask me, you can definitely put in the chat, and I would be glad to answer with you. Hear your answers. Let me go back to the last slide. Okay, we're going to start with a little icebreaker. And thank you so much for your patience with our technology. This is something that I haven't done in a while, and that's why you're the expert in online learning. And I'm on one side and you're on the other side. And COVID had some good and some bad, but one good thing that I learned was how to work with online learning. So if you teach ELLs online, just give me a quick thumbs up. And then that way I'll know that you're someone who does teach ELL students, whether that's in higher ed or K-12. And then for number 2, write your answer in the chat. How do you connect with your ELL students? I'm going to give it just a quick pause so you can go ahead and write that down in the chat. If you're watching this later on, you might just want to jot it down on a piece of paper or get an answer in your head and think about what you do to connect with those ELL students. So I'm going to give you just a moment for that. All right, moving on. So we all know that all of our states, the district, federal policies and procedures they are out there to protect our students when it comes to our ELL population. So I'm going to talk to you just a moment about that, just to know, make sure that we all know what the policies and procedures are that are already in place, like the McKinney-Vento Act, reimagining what ELL support looks like, the benefits of colleges of education, very important, and you'll see a lot of that in my presentation today. And then what is thriving? Thriving instead of surviving in ELL communities. So let's first start with the McKinney-Vento Act. This is something that you've heard over and over. And a lot of time we think just about homeless students, and it does include our homeless students, but let's look to see exactly what it is that, our students are going to get if they are ELL students. And one is they're going to get an immediate enrollment. So they do not have to have certain documents to enroll. So we're not going to wait a long time for a birth certificate or something as like that. They get full participation and instruction in ESL services. Um, if they're experiencing some homelessness, and that does happen, unfortunately, they can participate fully in academic programs and receive ESOL instruction at the same level as their peers, and of course, have access to all Title I and Title III benefits. So let's just reimagine what ELL support looks like. If they're in the classroom, what kind of support are we giving them? And let's kind of think today, since most of us are here to talk about online learning, what does online classroom look like for ELL support? How do we support students that we barely even see? We're going to talk a lot about that. So take just a moment again, and let's think a little bit about what ELL support looks like inside the classroom and in the online format. I'm going to give you just a moment to do that. Jot that down, speak with a colleague, or you might just want to kind of think about it for a moment. So we're going to talk first off about the benefits of working with colleges and universities. I know a lot of you are in what we call the, higher ed, realm. And so this is going to be very important to you. And I'm really looking forward to you seeing some of the things that we have done that have been quite innovative. So you want to have a partnership with a college of education, if not more than one, because they ensure that schools receive up-to-date evidence-based practices. You know that your students from colleges, they're not looking at outdated models. They're looking at all the newest research and what is working. So they're going to bring that into your schools, into your online school if you're teaching that way. But when placed in schools, college students, help ELO populations because it's actually building this pipeline of teachers that can work with multilingual learners. If they have never been in this situation and they become a beginning teacher or a beginning professor and they've never had these experiences, then it's going to be a lot harder for them to make that jump and be able to reach their ELO learners. University faculty can provide on-site professional development for teachers, something I've taken advantage of. You know why? Because a lot of times it's free. And schools and, K-8, K-12, the money's sometimes not there, but we're able to get them into our schools and they're able to help teach our teachers what needs to be done. And they're also watching college students actually, model what this looks like. So that builds competence and training and assessment intervention for our ELL students. It also increases our capacity for tutoring, mentoring, and academic support. So one of these, for instance, could be teacher candidates providing one-on-one tutoring, small group reading group, language group. So while they're doing their assignments, we're actually getting what we need in the classroom or online. So that's one advantage. I want to show you one thing that was done because a lot of times college students can't always come on campuses. So this is a you'll notice this young man who is actually making a video. I want you to note a couple things. I want you to note first off that he has a specific student in mind and he talks to her. Although it is recorded for this student, he talks to her as if he knows her. And he sticks with that same student all semester long. So when they go over vocabulary using a Freyer model type style, he's talking to her. I also want you to note his dress. He's dressed like he should professionally. He has his ID on. So that way, if you have an ELL student, you've got a parent that might be walking by, very concerned about, there's a male or a female on that's an adult. Well, we know that they are okay because they have the badge that is needed. So I'm just going to show just a minute of this.
Hello, Allison. This week we'll be going over week 6 vocabulary. All right.
And this is actually the vocabulary that she had for that particular week. We'll just watch him go over one more.
Okay. First word for this week is effective. 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 All right. The definition of effective is producing or capable of producing a result. For example, to the left here, it is more effective for the shape to be circular in order to move the red object easily. So as you can see, everyone else has a square shape. And as this one guy in the front with the blue on, he has a circular shape. Well, it's easier for him to move his ball or object than the other people. All right, so that makes the circular ball effective. Can I hear you say the word effective? Again? All right, one more time. Great. Next word.
Okay, so you noticed a couple different
Hello,
things
Allison.
about our student here. He is saying the word multiple times, and you can see that you can also he's having the student to actually repeat the word. He's using pictures and to make sure that they're able to see, and we know that that's always a strategy with ELLs. But he's also explaining it with the definition. He's reading the words, he's talking about the pictures. So that was one example of how we use that. Let me make sure I went to the right slide. Okay, this is a little different. This is actually if you are an AI person, some of us in my age group we're just getting started with some of it, so we might be a little bit behind. But this is actually, you'll hear a university professor's voice because she actually has students in a classroom with their AI. And she's going to be doing, or the students are going to be doing a small group with an ELL student. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit so you don't hear her entire discussion with the class. But so let me move this a little bit to about, let's do about here. And then you'll see what they're doing in class.
For filter low. And again, the focus is on working with DAVI, the ELL. So please make sure that you are making appropriate modifications and accommodations accordingly. And as a reminder, when the session starts, I will say begin session, and you need to give me an indication when you are wrapping up by saying, okay, students, great lesson. Let's move on to the next topic or something along those lines, so that I know that you're wrapping up so that we can end the simulation and give you feedback. And that being said, I am going to go ahead and have Ms. Johnson. She is going to give us an overview of the professional competencies that we are looking at today. And then Ms. Turner, we will get started with you. So Ms. Johnson, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So for today's simulations, the following competencies are addressed in the micro teaching sessions. Florida standards for ESOL endorsement, domain 4, ESOL curriculum, and material development. So really teachers will know, understand, and apply concepts, research-based best practices, and evidence-based strategies to plan classroom instruction in a supportive learning environment for ELL. FTCE, ESOL competencies 6 and 8, knowledge of and planning standard-based instruction. So competency 6 explains how to select methods that go hand in hand with the ESOL standards. And this is to ensure that they are receiving comprehensive and effective instruction. And competency 8 explains how to plan standard-based lessons for EL. FTCE professional competency 7, knowledge of research-based practices appropriate for teaching English language learners. This explains how important it is to use our resources and technology that we have access to in order to provide effective learning for our EL. Florida Educator Accomplished Practices Standard 3.H differentiate instruction based on an assessment of student learning needs and recognition of individual differences in students. So a teacher could ask students to create a non-linguistic representation for new content, such as graphic organizers, pictographs, and flowcharts. And the last one, subject area competency, science standard 1, knowledge of effective science instruction, number 6, apply differentiated strategies in science instruction and assessments based on student needs.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. That was an excellent overview of the competencies that we'll be addressing today. And
Okay, so as you can see, there was a lot just covered. I wonder if all the teachers in my state of Florida, if they're even familiar with all of those standards. Of course, we have our best standards of Florida. Every state does have standards, but there was quite a bit gone over. Now, I do want you to see just for 1 second, I'm going to fast forward so you can see that they actually do have students in this little group. So here they are. And so one of the students is the ELL student.
Great.
So if you see this student is actually the ESOL student. And so they actually are using the avatars and going through what a small group should look like. And you can see that we have some students who are non-ELL students. And, what does that setting look like? And what accommodations am I using for that student who is ELL? That's a little bit beyond. So there's some interesting things that you can do. And again, taking advantage of those partnerships with colleges and universities, there's really nothing like it. It actually helps our teachers to be better. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide. So what do you think the difference is in your own mind between surviving and thriving? I know right now in the non-online world, we are hanging on by a thread to get to our winter break. And, the kids are feeling it. The teachers are feeling it. I'm sure even online learning, they're starting to feel it. Everyone's kind of getting excited, ready for just a little break. But, think about that. So it's if I say that ELLs can thrive online when instruction is accessible, interactive, scaffolded, and culturally responsive, what does that statement mean to you? Let's look at that again so you have just a moment to think about it. ELLs can thrive online when instruction is accessible, interactive, scaffolded, and culturally responsive. So if you do have an answer and you'd like to put it in the chat, if you want to jot it down, if you're watching this with a colleague and you want to talk to them about it, please take this time. You're welcome to pause if you're watching it a little bit later, but think about that. And I'm going to go over some of these things as we move forward. So thriving point number 1, ELL students thrive when, and this is very important, all assignments, links, and videos are in one location. People get very fancy You might be fancy. You can tell that I'm not so fancy. So, right now when I'm using, my online tools, but sometimes we tend to do that. But, having them in one location is much more meaningful. The LMS uses simple language and visuals because, we've got to look at what we're trying to teach, not looking at making, everything a little more difficult. Just using that simple language and just visuals that they can use. Navigation is predictable and repeated. If you're going to change every single lesson, how the student is to go about moving forward, that's going to be very difficult and it's going to actually take away from learning. Use icons, folders, you can color code. Weekly modules can reduce like a cognitive load. So my point in saying this is that ELLs need instructional time spent on learning, not figuring out where the work is. So let's not send them on a treasure hunt to find out what it is that they need to do. Let's look at point 2. So ELL students thrive when, and this is when classes utilize visuals, models, and multimodal instruction. Of course, this is important for all students, online or otherwise, but it's necessary and it's absolutely necessary when you have ELL students. For instance, having visual cues and icons, having a graphic organizer so they can organize their thoughts, sentence frames, a short video, maybe not something that's too long, something that would catch their attention, and, that model each task so that they know exactly what to do. Anchor charts, like, we always do those in the classroom and they're on a wall, but, can you have a place electronically where they can go and look at that anchor chart? Because we've seen a lot of great research when it comes to using anchor charts. And the point of this point of thriving point number 2 is that visuals compensate for reduced in-person cues, which ELLs rely on heavily. When students are together face to face, there's a lot of things that they see, hand motions, facial, expressions and things, and that helps them much more. But when you're online, some of those things are not available. So we have to make up for that, whether it be an online class in higher ed or in K-12. Thriving point number 3, ELL students thrive when there is live language interaction. I know that this is difficult. This is hard sometimes to do this, but even in virtual spaces, ELLs need opportunities for language use. They've got to use them. The video that I showed earlier, of course, it was just a student using the actual vocabulary word. I would definitely say there would be more that would be needed for for that student to use language and to be able to practice. So, small group breakout rooms. A breakout room gives you that chance to have maybe just a few students in the group and talk to them, face to face. A structured talk routine. So, and one thing you'll see later when we look at data, ELL students, they don't really want to step up and be the one to talk. So if it's something that's structured the same every time, eventually they'll start to get confident where they will start to join the discussion. But having it the same every time for a while, having those teacher guided discussions and not just, you discussing, but letting them speak and then giving them that feedback directly and quickly right after. Having conversation prompts. Sometimes you might ask a question and they can't answer right away. So what are some conversation prompts you can have? Can you have those on your screen so that they know how to start that sentence or start a question, whatever it is, have those things available. Having a peer partner or a virtual talk buddy. You have to be careful with this one sometimes because I've noticed several times, just working with ELLs, they will go into their native language really quick. So we want to make sure, we want them to have those opportunities too. We want them to know they're, listen, you're bilingual. That's amazing. Most of us wish we were bilingual. But, where can they safely or with whom can they safely talk to using their English language? And then just having that authentic speaking and listening practice so they don't regress. So those are some things that they definitely need. Number 4, and this should probably have been number 1, and I thought about moving it up, but relationships are built first. That is difficult when they're ELL students. So what can you do? Because, you can't go to a school building like myself and, touch a shoulder or, just use, a very small phrase or give them a thumbs up or whatever it is. It's going to be a lot harder when you're online. So, having a welcome video is, wonderful. Let them kind of see a little bit of what your, life is like. You could be holding your, furry one and, something that they, kind of can take note in. And if they're older students, if they're in college, maybe something a little different, something that they can all relate to. Doing that weekly check-in is very important. You might know that they're giving the work, they're doing the work, but how are they doing? um, Having some bilingual communication. I know that that's not possible for all of us, but we have many different ways now with technology that we can do that. So sometimes, if that's at all possible, I would say that's really, really important. And I think one thing I've seen is when I do even attempt to use, whatever phrases that I do know, it really just makes them light up because they know that I'm trying. Um, Definitely trying to make some type of connection with the family, always important. That's going to be difficult for those of you with college students, but I think if you are in the K-12 realm, making any kind of effort, because you'll see that those families really do care about their child's progress or their teenager's progress. Using texting apps like Remind. So Remind is one that, is popular right now, but there are many others to choose from, and those are easily translated into their language. And just remembering that students learn the most when they feel seen and supported. So they'll see that you're making that effort, and that's what's going to add to their learning. Number 5, and there are only 8, so don't get to stay with me. ELL students thrive when scaffolds for reading and writing are provided. I think at the very beginning, I actually mentioned scaffolding. Scaffolding is important no matter what type of learner you have, but in online environments, you should supply one, they should have text to speech. There should be a bilingual glossary. A lot of times we have bilingual dictionaries, word to word. Something like that is fine. We've actually, in my district, come out with a glossary that gives them terms that actually help them to understand what the questions are. So a lot of academic language that we use and we don't think about, very important. Digital sentence frames, a chunked reading assignment. So having it broken down so they know, okay, I did that step. Now what do I need to do? I need to underline all the unfamiliar words. Then I need to do what? Have some teacher created read aloud videos. There's some of these sometimes you can find online, but how much better is it for them to hear that from you? Embedded vocabulary supports, and we've talked a lot about that today through this presentation. And just remember that ELLs need language supports within the content, not separate from it. So you need to teach it within that particular lesson, not, teaching, question words here and then giving an assignment and not being able to kind of show that the two are together and how knowing that support or the support that they need in content is right there for them and not separated, because that just makes it two different things. And we need to show them how that helps them to complete their assignments. Number 6 is that ELL students thrive when home languages are incorporated. Again, that's not always the easiest thing. I'm lucky that we have a lot of bilingual people within my building, but they're not always available. So it does strengthen their English acquisition. So having some dual language materials, translate instruction. You definitely want to translate things that you send to parents. That's important. Having those bilingual dictionaries and be selective when you pick those out. There are some I've seen that are wonderful and some it's ugh. And if you have a younger student, let's say 3rd grade and below, remember we just talked about using picture representation. So that's always important to do that. And opportunities for students to brainstorm or draft in their home language. So, if they want to do the outline for their essay in their language, but they're going to write it in English later, then let it happen, because when we brainstorm, everyone brainstorms a little differently. A lot of research shows that those of us who are my age who learn to write in cursive, that is a really effective way for us to get our writing down, our thoughts down quickly. And so that's something that, I use a lot when I'm planning things out. I'll use cursive and do that. And I brainstorm the way I brainstorm. So let them use their language if they need to do that. And just to remember, a thriving online model treats multilingualism as an asset. I have literally had parents come to conferences crying because they're so worried about their student being behind. And the one thing that I always want to make sure that they understand is it is the opposite. They're not just picking up a new language, but they have another language. And being bilingual is definitely a plus, and it's something that's going to serve them for the rest of their lives. Thriving point number 7, they thrive when feedback is timely, personal, and specific, not saying good, great job. What is it that they did a great job on? How are we going to make sure that they do that again? How specific are we being? Because if I say good job, what are they doing well? Or, let's try that again, or let's try that next time. Be very specific with them. They need it. And right away, if you can do it timely, like feedback right away, that's always best. That's going to help them to grow quicker. Names exactly what they did well. So be very specific. And if you're online, it might be something that you want to give them, and then also give them in writing so they can go back and look it over. If you can give one concrete next step, making sure that we're again scaffolding everything. You deliver things in visuals, audio, or short videos. We've spoken about that already, and highlights both content and language targets. And the whole idea of this is that feedback builds confidence and clarity. We all need feedback. I'm not going to get any feedback today. Hopefully, I'll get some later, but that really helps us, because then we know what we need to do next time, what we need to work on. So that's going to help your English language learners. And finally, ELL students thrive when teachers are well trained on online ESOL strategies. Professional development should include the SIOP and ESOL strategies adapted for online. So, and if you don't know what that is, that's one reason why we need to work with our colleges and universities, because they do, and they actually use that model quite a bit. Digital language supports are always important. Online assessment of ELL progress. I'm going to show you a little bit of what that looks like in a moment. Collaborative planning time with ESOL teachers. So hopefully you have someone on your staff, someone in your building, perhaps it's the TESOL instructor, like the one that you heard earlier, that you can actually talk with and go through this with. But remembering that online teaching requires new tools and traditional ESL, ESL, whichever you want to call it, or ELL techniques. So making sure that everyone who is teaching, whether it be online or in person, that they are very aware of these tools, because they are research based. That's the best thing about working with a college or university. We know it's not just something that someone had this bright idea that they came up with. We know that has had some definite research done, either qualitative or quantitative or both, hopefully.
Yeah. So if I
Okay.
can break in for one quick second,
Absolutely. Go
because
ahead,
if you
Valerie.
can go back to that slide for one second,
Absolutely. I'm going to
just
get out of this screen.
I'm holding most of the question. I'm holding questions for you, but
Are you okay?
just I think there might be a few people who came today because they're
Sure.
not familiar with some of the terminology, and I was just hoping maybe
100%.
you could give a little more description of the PSYOP ESOL, because some people might not be familiar with. Most people probably are familiar with the ESOL part, but if you wanted to go ahead and just kind of spell that out for us, so in case there are people who are first learning about this today and they want to understand the abbreviation.
Absolutely. So this is something that I haven't taught, but I know that the ELL learners that come in our building from the colleges and university use the SIOP method. Pardon me, water. But what they're looking for is how the teacher is embedding in their lesson, how they're actually using that, and they're listening intently to the teacher when they're in our building to make sure that they are incorporating, embedding those strategies within their teaching. I wish I would have done a whole slide on it, and that would have been really great to be able to kind of concentrate on the difference, but that's something that I would be happy to do at another time. That's something Dr. Blankenship, she is adamant about. And that's the professor that you heard earlier that was using AI in her classroom.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and think about those 8 points and think about maybe what might have like spoken to you. Was there something that stood out to you? Some of those things you've probably heard before. Some of them, might be new, or maybe it sparked an idea. Something resonated, like, I need to do a little bit more of that. So just think about those 8 points, and if you're watching this later, hopefully you can kind of go back through them and try to figure out which, you might need to incorporate, whether you are on the, higher, education level side, or you're in the K-12 side, if you're teaching in person or online. But just think about those different points and how those might be able to help you. Okay, I'm going to escape this screen so that I can get back to our presentation. Okay, we're going to go here from our current slide. Hopefully I can get it to go back. There we go. So instructional design, we're always looking for our best practices, and we've talked a lot about that throughout this presentation. And those are things like using the models, repeating the words. Some other things that you can do, you might be able to take a multiple choice maybe and use some accommodation, take maybe one of those choices away, using some of the practical models that we've talked a little bit about, including the SIOP method, interaction and support, using all of those, and then looking at different tools to consider. So as we move forward, we're going to look at some of this as well. So let's talk first off about something that, really a lot of people just don't talk about, and that's hiring people. It's so important to be inclusive when you hire. There's nothing better than a relatable role model for your students, whether it be, someone who is of the same culture or of a different culture, but someone that would be able, for them to be able to see and look up to, someone that may or may not know the language, but doing your very best, looking at all your candidates and thinking about the students that you serve, and which might be best. We have found that, when we have someone, and my school, we're very high Hispanic population, and that's pretty much been my experience in two of my schools. Last year, I was at a school, and you'll see in a little bit, we had 18 languages spoken. So, then you have those types of populations, but just having them on your staff, it can be a teacher, or maybe it is a support person, but having relatable role models is always helpful. It builds those cultural and linguistic bridges when you have someone who is of the same culture, or has the same language. They can help be advocates for specific needs. They might know better than what others might know, because some of your teachers might not be familiar with other cultures. So it's having that person to reach out to is very vital. And then making sure, again, that we always value being multicultural and multilingual. That's always important, and to make sure that we're portraying that to our students and to our parents. So I didn't want to skip out on that because it's just something that I've seen over and over again and the difference that it makes and the smiles on the faces when they actually hear their language from a human being. Very important. Talking again about colleges of education, remember, like, as I talked a little bit before, it meets the needs of students. And I say K-8, I'm sorry, I'm a K-8 person, as well as adults and College of Ed programs. You can see earlier in the videos, not only are they learning teacher strategies for ELL students, but they're learning standards and they're learning, how best to work with them in a small group or one-to-one, making sure that there's some kind of connection. Creativity and innovation. I wanted to add that one. I had one student from one of our universities, and I wasn't quite sure what I was about to watch, and I did have to go over the videos before I was able to give them to students. Of course, you want to make sure that you preview, important. But he was sitting in a computer lab and there are a few other young men in there. And the next thing I know, before he starts his vocabulary lesson, is he pulls out a lightsaber. And apparently he has found from questionnaire that that student liked Star Wars. So he actually, did a little segment at the beginning, used the student's name. Wish I had that video for you. I'll have to try to beg Dr. Blankenship for that one. But just to be able to get that, and so he taught it in a different way just to kind of get their attention. Any student wants something to lure them in. It doesn't matter if it's an adult learner or if it's a student in middle or elementary school. They definitely need that. Hearing real voices. It was wonderful that what you saw as far as the virtual classroom, but how great is it that they could hear from students that really are 10 years older than they are, maybe less, according to what age group you work with. But just hearing someone say that over and over. And then just, talking about the testimonials, I had so many students tell me how much those meant to them. But I also heard from a lot of parents during the COVID era that said, hey, we watched those videos with our child and we actually learned so much English as well. Like I said, it's a very valuable thing. Reach out to your colleges of ed, to any of the TESOL, faculty there. And, if you're not already working with them, work with them, because I'm telling you, it has been a game changer in my experience. So now let's kind of flip a little bit and talk about academic and language data and things that we want to collect as data. Now this can look a little bit different in person as far as, in person and online, but data collection is important, and we're not just talking test scores. So we're looking at English proficiency, and I know in the state of Florida, we have ways to measure that. I'm sure you do in your state as well. Formative assessments, not just the end of the year and May test, but what is it looking like from week to week or unit to unit or chapter to chapter? Yes, we're going to look at our standardized test. Of course, we're going to do that. That's very important. But also having a student work or portfolio, like somewhere where you can collect those things, whether it be digitally or if it would be something that you get in person, because all of that shows us a lot about the learner. And then also engagement and perception data is important. What are you observing? What are other people maybe observing? Giving the students a survey, seeing what's working, what's not working. And then, of course, the personal and background data, and that goes back to that relationship. What is the student and family background like? You don't need to know every single detail of how, they came to live in America or any of that, but just a little bit of information about them. And what has their educational experience been in their country? They could be new to the United States, and maybe the student's just going into kindergarten. So there might be very little. And then, of course, what is it they like to do? What are their goals? That's something that you can plug into as well. It's very important. So one way is to have student self-assessments, and you can do this online. One way of doing this is just by doing surveys, and that's as easy as a Survey Monkey or using, Google Docs. some way to just kind of collect some information about them. And then also journals, having a quick, like at the beginning of class, okay, we're going to take 3 to 5 minutes, and I want you to write about something that you found exciting or just something where you can actually kind of get to know that a little bit better. And then getting that parent guardian feedback and, just, talk about, what challenges are you having? What have you seen that's going well with your student? Is your student, your child talking more in English at home? Um, do you allow them to watch one English program a day, or, what does that look like in your home? What's the general well-being? Because some of our ELL students, sometimes have needs that, go beyond, just our academics. I mean, some might have, some food insecurities or, other things that we need to be aware of so that maybe we can provide resources to them. And then what is the learning experience like at home? I mean, do we have, several brothers and sisters? Are we, trying to find a quiet place for them? Are they doing well? Are you having to drag them to the computer so that they can get online and learn? But just getting that feedback from the parent and guardian will give you a very good, solid picture when you're using online. Now, I want you to look at something that we use, and I try to just rename this a little bit and just use student A, B, C, D, and E. And this is real data that was used. This had their homeroom teacher, and these happen to be second graders. And what I did is I kept up with their report card grades. That's something that, online you can do, and you can do that also, in person, but looking at their online grades and then looking at what their scale scores were. In this case, it was on the STAR test. That's what we take in Florida. And then the two columns that you see that are here, this column was, are they actually attending the morning lab because they had the opportunity to be in a morning lab to work on homework they didn't understand or to get on what we use here in Leon County schools, and that's Imagine Learning. And so those were like answering those questions like, hey, are they going? And, no, no, they're not. Yes, they are. And then you can look, I really thought that teachers did a really thoughtful job. You can see strong student, no issues, always completes homework, participates in class, discussions, but this one needs an explanation of vocabulary. And so maybe that's a teacher I need to go back to, and let's talk a little bit more about how we're teaching it. Making great progress, has strong effort. Effort matters. Always completes homework. The student is rushing, needs to do work on decoding and multi-syllabic words and comprehension. Extra help with reading sometimes needed. So there's just several things. And, this is not just surface level stuff, like they dug in deep. Let's take another look at another part of this. And so here again, we have the teacher. These are third graders. So this time, again, they have more than one, excuse me, their STAR test. They have more than one test taking time. This student taking his extra time. These are all of the accommodations that are being used. AR is improving, needs to work on comprehension and writing. You can see parents working at home with him. Issue is comprehension and writing, is not taking his extra time. So the teachers, one, you can tell are well aware of what those accommodations are. They have those in hand, but also they know if they're using it or not. So that's very important. So anyways, we have a lot of good data here, and this was done every 9 weeks. I did not skip because I wanted to track those students to make sure that we knew how they were doing. So, and this one actually down here used extended time. Still is working on reading comprehension. We know if you're looking at the science of reading, that's the very last thing that they have to do. So we know the student can decode, they know their phonics, they know all of that. They can read probably fluently at this point, but it's not helping them with their comprehension. So they're having issues with vocabulary. Super important. It's an ELL student. Of course, they're going to have issues here. So what are we doing, and what tools are we giving our teachers? And then finally, this last, sorry, not finally, I have two more slides on this one. We're moving up to like fourth grade students. So again, you can look at their scores, you can look at their report card grades, but you can see here, who is using the lab. The student is using the lab and they are using their accommodations, but again, needs questions read, working in small group, has a difficult time understanding directions and reading. So there's some things that are going on, but they're having some tiered intervention because those students were going to need some intervention time. So they might need double of what they're getting each day. And of course, if we need to, we can sometimes read directions. It's according to what is in their plan that you set forth in their ELL plan. So, and then last, I just had some great teacher comments that I thought were worth looking at. This teacher uses a pocket talk and allows the student to use that. Um, the student gestures for needs. They're doing well with letter sounds. They have strong effort, uses peer helpers, one-to-one assistance, um, rephrase directions need, verbal praised. This one has an effort needs to improve. So maybe they're not trying hard, maybe they are trying hard, and it doesn't look the same as what it looks to our students who are not ELL. And then, this student needs to be more independent. Maybe that teacher feels that they're at that point. It's time for them to start to move on. They need to complete homework, participates in class discussion, and then you can again see some of the same repeated things that are needed. They need visual examples. Why are they having issues with cold reads? Well, a cold read, they haven't seen it before. If they're doing a normal story, they're probably reading it more than once. So they're going to need that. And also, small group testing is needed. So it might even be the type of way that you're testing them and what type of environment. So as you can see, there are many things that we can use besides just test scores to be able to take good data that's actually going to make a difference where you can brainstorm and figure out what it is for each child and what they might need. This concludes my presentation today. If you weren't able to join, I hope you're able to listen in. You can find me. I have an ORCID number, and you can see some of my writing. I have done some writing, a book chapter, working with universities on with TESOL and ELL students, and you can see a little bit about or read a little bit about what I talked about today. Also, some journal articles. My dissertation is a little different. It's online as well. And that's because I was a principal in a community partnership school. So that's a very interesting model that if you have any interest at all of what that looks like and the history behind it, then, check that out. But I'm so glad that you were able to join me. And if there's anything I can do, you can see my email address. That's my cell phone number. Feel free to reach out by text, or if you'd like to email me, and I will do everything I can to make sure I help you. As far as the SIUP method, I'll be glad to give you a detailed, version of that, especially because I work with a professor who is an avid and very knowledgeable instructor who has been working with the SIUP method for quite a while. So thank you again.
And I want to thank you for being here, and thank everybody who is live and in the future. I was my our future people watching it in the future. Um, but thank you for being here today. We did some there was some chatters going on, and
Okay,
things that kind of jumped
great.
out. I think I love a colleague of mine, and you said this without saying these words, but he always stresses connection before content. And I love the fact that
Love
you
that
spent a
too.
lot of, I just like it that because it's short. But because it doesn't matter how good your content is if you haven't connected with them. And and so that was one comment that I saw. I got some private messages, and there's messages all over the place. I was keeping up.
Oh, goodness. Okay,
Um,
great. I can't wait to hear.
um, but also, a couple of things I noticed that I really enjoyed. Um, I don't, the one group I don't do a lot of work with is the K-8. Other than I do work with some of the instructors in some of the professional development work I do. But I love the attention to detail in like the first video with the gentleman doing the vocabulary that you mentioned, like he had his badge on and the visuals of it and the importance of those kind of things, particularly working with children. That's a whole nother level of,
Yeah, it
you know,
is.
up there. And things like that. But I think as more people, get into the online world, because many people, as you mentioned, got shoved in there because of COVID and did not go willingly, and that's okay. And tried to run back to classrooms as fast as they could. But the reality is that there is always going to be more of this coming, and just those types of things of how I did some work with teachers over the COVID era, and that was the thing they kept saying, how do I connect through, how do I connect, and it's those little things, like you mentioned, maybe their pet, maybe something that just builds that connection through the screens. I really I personally made a little note. I liked that one. um and the other thing, I'm just, as people, as we share this out to our future viewers, one of the things I always like to stress to people with sessions like yours is there's big A accessibility and there's little a accessibility. And so much of what you talked about today is so relevant to adult learners, is so relevant to
It is.
everyone.
Yeah.
I did a session at a university a couple of years ago, and one of my areas that I chatter about a lot is gamification. And I was explaining, using sort of a choose your own adventure and letting people respond in different ways to avoid the cognitive load that you mentioned in one of the slides. And I was just like, think about the load of like somebody having to like listen in one language and take it, translate it, then come up with the answer, translate that back, like all of those things, and like, giving them opportunities to do different things different ways. So I really appreciated that. And there was one of the directors of the program in the room, and as I was walking around, he kind of, called me over and he goes, because he is not English first language, and
Ah,
and he was like, "Thank you for saying that." Thank you
oh,
for saying that. It's those type of things I think people don't understand how much that means to the adults as well as the children, and in some cases more for the adults than the children.
yeah. No
Um,
one talks about it, but it's a vital thing in education.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And the last thing was just, and the answer may be I don't know, or I haven't used that, and that's okay. But we always get questions about tech because we're here in tech. So there's tech. And you talked a lot about, the vocabulary and reading comprehension and the different levels that we have to go through to get them to reading comprehension. I was just curious if you have any thoughts about any of the ed tech tools like Brisk or Rewordify or any of those that allow those learners to kind of scaffold from, paring down the language. If you had any thoughts about any of those, because there's always questions that come in about tech. So I just
Yeah,
had to throw that
I
in.
know. And that, that's something, I've done some exploring. I know that I did mention like the text to speech.
Hmm.
I know that in the schools, we're starting to do more of the read and write,
Hmm.
which is another tool. But as far as, a program that I feel is the best and like you've got to get this one. I don't. And I'll be honest, even the program that we use within our district to try to teach our students, some are successful with it and some are not.
Okay.
Um, some just need to go, if they're doing Lexia is our normal reading program, and it is very scaffolded using the science of reading.
Hmm.
So it might be that they just have to go to that, but it's going to take them back to their letters, their letter
Hmm.
sounds. It's going to go very gradual into, their digraphs and all of that. So I wish there was something that I had researched that just is the end all be all. I haven't found it, but would love to be able to find it or
Yeah.
create it.
Yeah, no, I was just curious because I think, like I said, that's one of the I got a question about, do you use any, language leveling So I'm sort of
Mhm.
I'm translating the question into what I understood it to be, what I understood it to be. But yes, hey, maybe that's your next project. Maybe
It could
or
be. I
somebody
am.
listening to this, maybe
Yeah.
that's their next project. They're like, hey, I want to do that.
Yeah.
That'd be great. You
That
could
would be
collaborate with them.
amazing. Yes,
You
and
never
please
know.
share it with me if you do it. I
Okay.
will say, we have used Pocket Talk quite a bit,
Hmm.
and there are a lot of different dialects for each language. So
Yeah.
it's not that I'm recommended, even though someone did make a TikTok with me showing
Hmm.
them how to use it. I wasn't aware that they were doing that, but I got contacted by the company, so obviously they did see it. But anyways, I do think that if you're going to use a tool like that, be very careful and see if you can get the right dialect because that's very imperative too. You
Yeah.
can't just put everyone in a room and have the exact same language. Get as close as you can. It matters.
It does. It does.
It
It matters.
matters.
Yeah, it matters so much.
Mhm.
So I appreciate that. Yeah, I did not expect there to be there's no tool that's perfect for everything, no matter
I
what the
wish.
subject matter is. So, like I said, we're just always kind of curious. It's one of the questions that I know always comes up every time we have any type of session is just, hey, do they have a recommendation? And
Mhm.
quite often my answer on some of them has been, no, not really. Same as yours. Like it's
Yeah.
contextual. Try some of them out. What works for one student might not work for another, and
Yes.
it's nice to have some options. And so
Mm.
if your district, if your school has the capacity to have different tools and options, and I know that can be a limitation as well. I'm spent all of my time in urban areas, New Orleans, New York City. When you said languages, I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
probably 80 languages in a classroom. And it feels like not that many
Yes.
students, hopefully, but in the school there definitely would be that many. So anyway, but
Definitely.
thank you again for coming in and sharing with us today. And I hope you will come back and talk to us some more.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I thank you, and I thank everybody who is watching this now, in the future, whenever. The recording will be posted to usdla.tv as expeditiously as we can get it up there. So if you found something useful, you can share it with your colleagues and say, hey, you need to go listen to Dr. Day. You need to go to listen to her because she knows what she's talking about. And so anyway, but that's all for today. Hope you see you back here at a future webinar. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording for today.